Call this special business meeting of the Anchorage School District to order at 6 p.m. on February 25th. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All members of the board and the superintendent are present tonight. And yes, I'd like to ask Member Wilson if she'll read our land acknowledgement for us.
We acknowledge that we gather here today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina people of the Upper Cook Inlet. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina people have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. ASD is committed to diversity and inclusion, and it is with honor and respect that we recognize all Indigenous people who live and learn in our community.
I want to welcome you to our meeting and thank you for attending and supporting the work of the Anchorage School District. The board thanks students, parents, teachers, staff, our school business partners, and the entire community for your investment in our district with your time, your talent, and your tax dollars. This is a special meeting. We will not be taking any public testimony tonight. It is one that was called specifically to work on the budget with any amendments. Many of you here tonight may remember that just a week ago we took extensive amounts of public testimony. We do appreciate you coming back out tonight. With that, we will move to approval of the agenda. If I can have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve ASD Memorandum Number 096S, the FY 2025-2026 Preliminary Financial Plan and Budget as amended. One of the recommended action is to approve the 25-26 preliminary budget and authorize an upper limit spending authority of $886,250,188.
And I'm sorry, we actually need a motion to approve the agenda.
Oh,
Let's start there. Apologies,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. We move to approve the agenda as listed.
second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Without objection, we have accepted the agenda, which brings us to section B. And the first item is the motion. If I can have your motion, Member Jacobs.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So move to approve ASD Memorandum Number 096S, the FY 25-26 Preliminary Financial Plan and Budget as amended, which has a recommended action of to approve the 25-26 preliminary budget and authorize an upper limit spending authority of $886,250,188.
I second.
Moved and seconded. The budget is before us now. Any discussion or amendments? Member Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. So in my last campaign to get reelected to the school board, I very clearly indicated I would support continuing the IGNITE program. The budget before us today deletes the IGNITE program. And I think there's things in this budget that are not as high a priority of the IGNITE program as I think the public would think. So to restore the IGNITE program and to utilize another source of funding for it, which I have expressed before, that the so-called middle school model, which adds an extra planning period to middle school, non-instructional period, that costs us $3.43 million a year and doesn't provide any instruction, I would move an amendment that would discontinue this middle school model, which would be a savings of $3.43 million, and restore the IGNITE program, which is a cost of about works out to a net savings of about $381,000. So I move amendment number 2.
Do I have a second?
For discussion purposes, I'm going to second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. The items on the floor. Member Donnelly, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr. President. There are proposals that we will consider later tonight that may, if they passed, would say if future money comes in, Ignite would be restored. But this would actually change the actual budget, real dollars, not potential future dollars, to make sure that Ignite stays funded within our district. You know, I've been in elected office representing my hometown here for over 23 years, and I've never broken a campaign promise. And this was a promise I made during the campaign. So I'm once again keeping my promise.
Member Higgins?
Well, I've kept my promises too, I think. I'm a strong supporter of middle school for a number of reasons. I remember when it was adopted in the 90s, and all the studies showed that academic results and graduation rates, they all benefited. We've added sixth grade to the middle school, to all the sixth graders in the middle school. They have challenges, the bottom third, with social emotional learning issues. You're around kids that are going a little bit crazy. The seventh and eighth graders, no offense, and the challenges they have, and the teachers and the principals strongly supportive of this. We said that when we moved them in there, we were going to provide the support to make it work, and middle school to me is critical. So I wanted this to be a discussion. I don't want to cut it short without that, but I believe that middle school is a major impact on academic outcomes and for the benefits of the students that are really in difficult situations where they're located. So I'm going to oppose it, but I wanted you should have the right to voice your support for it. Thank you.
Member Lessons?
Yeah, I wanted to use this opportunity to give a little bit of a voice to one of our middle school principals who wrote about the middle school model quite recently. And this principal said, I strongly urge you to reconsider cutting collaboration time, and defines this collaboration time in the middle school model as a vital support system for students and families. And that leader then reflects that the decision to include sixth grade in the middle schools was made with the trust and support of the community. It was a bold move to expand our middle schools, but it was grounded in the belief that we could provide our students with support and resources they need to succeed. And the collaboration time is an essential component of this support. This principal goes on to share that our sixth graders are in a critical stage of development. They're navigating the transition from elementary to middle school in a setting of, in this case, over 1,000 students, where they face not only academic challenges, but also social and emotional changes. The addition of collaboration time is crucial to ensuring that our teachers can work together to address the unique needs of these students. It allows for targeted interventions, differentiated instruction, and an ability to monitor progress in real time. One of the ways that I interpret the middle school model is directly supportive of our board goal for 8th grade math proficiency. So I will not be supporting this amendment at this time.
Member Bellamy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let the record show that I agree with Member Higgins, probably the first time ever. Anyway, I'm joking. We agree on more than we disagree. As a former middle school principal, I have probably fought half my career to move from traditional middle schools to, from a traditional junior high school to a middle school. Because I believe that that is the best environment for our students. I've also had to create schools that had exceptional programs for all students, which would include our Ignite students. And I hate that we are competing programs against each other. That does not serve us well either. So at this point, I will not support. It would take, I don't know what it would take for me to get out of middle schools, probably if I wasn't on the board, maybe, but I understand that we are looking for money, but we can't cannibalize all of our programs just to get a few dollars. I think it's possible for us to, if we can be patient, and if we can look at some of the amendments that are going to come forward tonight, I think that's going to serve us better than to be picking at every single and competing our programs against each other. So I can't support the middle school, getting rid of the middle school model.
Member Wilson.
I appreciate that Member Lessons read much of what was written by one of our middle school principals who articulated well the challenges that and the importance of the support that that the middle school model provides to our middle school staff and our students, particularly because we recently moved our sixth graders to middle school. They need that additional support to provide what our students need at that age. That is, if anybody has worked in middle school or with middle school students, it is a difficult transitional age for students. And so it's a blessing that we have such amazing staff that work with those students. They need that planning time. It's something that I'm not willing to take away from them, because especially since the conversation tonight is already to take away so many of our, potentially have the conversation to have to take away staff from those schools. To take away the middle school model in addition to the conversations that we're going to have would be absolutely devastating to our middle schools. In addition to the potential, if we do not get that additional funding that we are desperately hoping that we get for our schools, the loss of the potential loss of staff, the potential loss of assistant principals from those schools is going to be devastating enough. But to lose the middle school model would be way too difficult. I would absolutely not support this amendment.
I'd like to also be in the speaking order to say I've taught in the traditional junior high model, the middle school model, and the high school model. And I think we would be a lot better served if we were able to push the middle school model into our high schools. And at one point, there was actually some effort to do that, but it's been about 20 years ago, I think. But it is a very vulnerable age where students don't change physically, they don't change physically, and then rather dramatically and suddenly in a short period they do. And some of those students are really ready to be in a big school with 800 or 900 other kids and function there. And other students are very much not. And Member Wilson's point in particular, that we have just put sixth graders. Recently, we've had sixth graders in some of our middle schools for quite some time, but now they all are in middle school. Backing down on those supports has really a widespread impact on every seventh and eighth grade, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade student. And I should say, I also had a son that was in the Ignite program, and I know what that meant to him when he found out he was accepted and would come home and talk about what they did each day. All of these programs have a lot of value, and sadly, we've been in this position of triage and have picked some programs that are working really well, but we're trying to do the least damage to the least number of students. And that's kind of a sad way to build a budget. So I too will be opposing it. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Member Donnelly.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that. If we had unlimited resources, I think extra planning periods would be good in middle school and also in high school. But now we're faced with choices of the least damaging budget revisions. And to me, the middle school model is not as valuable because middle school will continue without a non-instructional planning period, but Ignite will not if this budget was the final budget. And so that's why I think that Ignite rises to be a higher priority than the middle school model.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Member Sullivan to put it to a vote. Member Donnelly.
Oh, the reboot of my computer will not let me log in.
Oh, that's a sign for IT to swoop in. And member, yeah, we can do voice on this vote to start out with, and then we'll be prepared. Ms. Sullivan.
Member Higgins,
No.
Member Wilson,
No.
Member Lessons,
No.
Member Bellamy,
No.
Member Donley,
Yes.
Member Jacobs,
No.
President Holloman,
No. And that amendment fails 6-1. Before we move on, I just do want to say that Representative Colon has joined us for the night. We have so few representatives that join us, I don't think to look around to recognize them at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you very much for being here with us. Member Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And also real quickly, I want to note that our student representative, Josh Pack, has joined us electronically.
Another vital, very special program in our district that's endangered by this budget is the immersion schools. Restoring the teachers in our immersion schools would cost about $1,520,000. So I do believe, just as I felt with the middle school model, that our immersion schools are more valuable than the non-instructional periods within our middle schools. And so amendment number 4, which I will move in a second, utilizes the funding from the discontinuation of the middle school extra planning period to fully fund immersion schools. And with that, I'd move amendment number 4.
Do we have a second?
Wait, find out where she.
Seconded by Member Higgins. Member Donnelly, if you'd like to speak to your amendment.
You know, our immersion schools, I think they deserve to be part of the actual budget and just not a promise that if more money comes in, we will restore the immersion school funding. I believe that might be appropriate, more appropriate for the middle school model non-instructional planning period than the 12 teachers our immersion schools are going to lose in the actual budget, rather than making them contingent on additional funding coming in. So that's why I believe amendment number 4 is a better choice.
Member Higgins.
Yeah, just put this in proper perspective. I think this budget hopefully is not our final budget. We'll get some money from the state. The question is how much. And then at that point, we need to rank what the highest priorities are, and which we reestablish depending upon what the legislature approves. I think that Kelly Lessons and Carl Jacobs have both presented a proposal, if depending upon the money, how we would put it in the classrooms. So I start ranking the various odds and ends of what we're comparing. I haven't been doing that, because the budget we have, and we have to address $111 million, is one, is virtually impossible. It's the worst assignment I've had on the school board, and I've been on it a long time. And it's just not feasible. It's hurting people. And so I just don't want to get into the ranking of one cut versus another. Let's hope we move past that. But if we go forward with a budget which is less than what we hope we get, we're going to have a further discussion on what we cut and what we don't. So I don't want to rule anything in, but when we do decide on it, we have to talk about what's going to hurt the kids least, and then cut there and then try to go forward. And I'm a strong supporter of immersion program. There's not an issue there. In fact, my motion will address that issue of the concerns that I have. But I just don't want to get into try to balance the budget differently as if this is going to be the final budget, because if it is the final budget, I'd want to revisit it anyway.
Any other comments? Seeing Member Donnelly, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you for wrap up. I just think that the actual budget should reflect the board's priorities. The budget that we pass should reflect the priorities, and to make the immersion programs contingent on additional funding coming in is not my highest priority. Non-instructional planning periods are not as important, I believe, as our teachers in our wonderful immersion schools. So I just think the actual budget should reflect that.
Any other comments? Seeing none, are we prepared to vote electronically now? Okay. Okay. If you will ask Student Representative Pack to cast his vote.
Student Representative Pack,
Yeah, and if you'll go ahead and put the motion on the screen. Oh, okay. I mean to vote. We have not voted electronically in a very long time. And IT chose this Tuesday to make machines do updates because we normally don't meet on this day. So we're a little ragged on electronic voting, but you should have it on your screen now if you're properly logged into Board Docs.
Student Representative Pack,
No.
Is anyone not seeing it on their screen yet? Okay. And that motion fails 6-1. Member Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate you calling on me. The immersion program, in this budget is being reduced by 12 instructors. I think that even some partial restoration of that would be advantageous. So a possible other source of funding might be the existing Office of Equity and Community Engagement, which actually the name's been modified for the third time now. So I can't remember all the additional words that got added to the name of this office or this department. But that would be a savings of $419,000. And if we deleted the funding to the Coalition for Education Equity, which is a dues of $32,000, which I've talked about every year here at budget time, this particular group actually lobbies against the interests of the taxpayers in Anchorage. And we're the only major school district that's a participant in that group. And I do not believe we should be in that group lobbying against ourselves. And if you took an additional 1% in administrative services function in the state codes 510 and 550, which are the codes that are non-classroom related administrative costs. So to protect the classrooms by that, from any of that reduction, the total reductions would be about $782,000. And then we could use that money to restore half of the immersion instructors that the budget deletes, which would cost about $760,000. So that breaks out about even. And so with that, I would move amendment number 5 to restore 50% of the immersion teachers to this budget.
Do we have a second? Member Higgins is seconded. Member Donnelly, if you wish to speak to your motion.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. President. I can't remember exactly how many years ago. It was about 4 or 5, I'm thinking, when the Office of Equity and Community, well, actually at the time, it was the Department of Equity and Compliance was created. And that's the predecessor of the existing DEI department that we have for the school district. I remember that night very well because the new director spoke to us about the intent of how they were going to pursue the goals of the department. It was very concerning because the testimony that night was that they would utilize modern critical race theory to implement their goals, and even reference some of the more well-known critical race theory authors. We all know that critical race theory has its origins in Marxism And I believe in subsequent meetings, I brought in their books and read quotes from them, which I think were just outrageous. And I think very few people in this community would actually agree with some of the quotes that are contained in those works. So it was very concerning that this whole department originated in what I think was a really mistaken philosophy. So I really think that the immersion teachers are more important than this particular department. Now, the reason it's $419,000 and not the full $700,000 that department costs at this point in time is because there's a couple other things in there that I think are very worthy. One of them is the volunteer coordinator to get parents into schools more, and I support that. So I've deleted that amount from this reduction, and that can be moved over to the superintendent's office. Another was to American Sign Language interpreters, and I think they're very valuable. So I deleted the funding from them from this reduction. So they would be preserved by reducing the department or eliminating the department. For the rest of the savings is $419,000. I think I've already spoke to the 1% reduction and the elimination of the membership for the Coalition of Educational Equity. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Member Higgins? And then
Yeah,
Member Jacobs.
we're one of the top 100 size school districts in the country and the most diverse in the country. And this particular Office of Equity and Community Engagement, when you've got over 100 languages out there, including sign language, which you got added, you made reference to that, but all of the other groups that we have in there is all geared towards success of students, all students. And that equity, that there were going to be a connection there. This is not critical race theory or some other type of labels that people want to put on it. I think it's unfair and unrelated, and we're not discussing the subject. We're just labeling it, and therefore it must be bad. I disagree with that strongly. I don't like labels and never did. So in this particular case, I think what we're doing is we're reaching out to communities. We know that when we have families engaged with education, results go up. We know that when we have connections, and there are lots of different languages, over 100 in the school district, we have a lot of challenges with that. And I'm not turning any child away. It's equity, if you want to call it that. But what we're really talking about is just communications, and we have to be engaged that way. And so I'm not leaving anyone with a label. I do not agree with that. And I strongly support the fact that we are responsible for every child's success. And when we see a need and we're addressing it, I think we're doing what needs to be done. And I'm proud of that the ASD is doing that. Thank you.
Member Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for the maker of the motion. I understand that there were some portions of the Office of Equity and Community Engagement that were deemed worthy and not chosen for this reduction. The portions of that line item that didn't meet that criteria, could you tell me what those are? What positions would be affected, job titles, and then what the responsibilities of those individuals are on a day-to-day basis?
Member Donnelly.
Was the best summary of that, I think, would be by the actual name of the department. The name of the department has evolved over time into the Department of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. I believe the community engagement portion relates to the parental volunteer coordinator, which I support. And I believe the inclusion might relate very well to the American Sign Language interpreters, which I strongly support. So I would reach the conclusion by that the focus of the remaining portions of that department are diversity and inclusion, or equity.
Member Bellamy.
Mr. Chair, could I follow up?
That's
Yes,
right.
Member Jacobs.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the analysis. Is there a job title or specific day-to-day responsibilities that you could reference that I could better understand your analysis as to how they met the category of not worthy that you referenced when deciding what to include in this reduction and what not to include.
Member Dunley.
Well, I would defer that to the superintendent, the specific details of these particular positions, but one of them, of course, would be the director.
Mr. Chair, I have no
Yes.
questions for administration. I was purely referring to the maker of the motion because he referenced the term worthy, and so I was interested in the analysis that got us to the point for making the amendment. With that said, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Member Bellamy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this department has provided access to more volunteers in our schools. This department has reached out to more families in every section of the community. And a lot of times, in a lot of instances, it's families that we have not connected with before. And that, I don't know, I mean, I was here tonight when you still remember from 5 years ago, Member Donnelly, what that person said. This is not that. This is a new superintendent. This is really almost a half new board. And so I can't support the motion because I see value for our students, our families, our community with the work of the department. I also see value in being a member of the Coalition of Educational Equity. And to identify that program as being harmful to the community, I absolutely totally disagree. And I've been on the board not as long as you, but a long time. And I have had nothing but positive student-focused engagements with them. And for us, the largest district in the state, to not have a partnership with them, I don't think serves us as a board well. Neither does it serve our community. So I can't support this motion. I do support our immersion programs. We've got wonderful immersion programs. And I think we can salvage it another way than to just pick at the things that obviously you do not like. So thank you.
Member Wilson.
So the office is diversity, equity, inclusion, and community engagement. And I know there was question on the actual title, and I wanted to clarify that. My day job is that of a community outreach manager. So on just the community engagement alone, I work for an organization with approximately 4,000 members. And the community engagement aspect of that and the outreach is more than I can accomplish in a day. And I work more than 40 hours a week, every week, trying to accomplish that for my organization. This office works to accomplish that for not just our 42,000 students, but our staff, our families. So the multitude of work that comes with just the community engagement part of that title, I personally can attest to the amount of work it's amazing, the work that they do. The diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Member Higgins stated, we have over 100 languages. I believe it's 107 languages spoken in this district. And I'm very personally proud of the fact that the Anchorage School District works so hard to reach so many of our families that speak different languages. And these are not just first generation families. My dad spoke very little English. He was very successful. My family has lived in Texas for many generations, all Spanish speakers. So I can attest to the fact that our families aren't just first generation immigrants that speak other languages. Our kids coming through our schools aren't just first generation kids that are learning English. These are families that are an integral part of our country and our economy, as my family was. And so the outreach that our district does to reach out to those families to make sure that they're educated so that their kids can be successful in our district, I'm very proud of that. So that is part of what this office makes sure happens. The work that they do, and that's not just multiple language, it includes our sign language students, which I've been incredibly happy to see. We have our interpreters that are available for our students, for our families that are hard of hearing. We have our interpreters that are available for our families that speak other languages. This is all incredibly important stuff for our families, for our kids to be successful. And that's why I'm sitting here, is to make sure that our kids have the opportunity to be successful. So no, I'm absolutely not going to support this amendment, because I do absolutely believe that our Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement is incredibly important to our district, our kids, and our community.
Member Lessons?
I cannot say anything more eloquently than Member Wilson just before me. So I appreciate the thoughts that you've shared, and I will not be supporting this amendment.
Are there any other comments? Seeing, hearing none, I'll ask you to get Member Pax. I'm sorry, Member Donnelly.
Mr. President, I was just making sure that nobody else wanted to talk before. I appreciate the debate. As far as our partnership with the equity group, Fairbanks School District's not a member. The Kenai School District's not a member. The Matsu School District's not a member. And even the Juneau School District's not a member, because their focus is not on the interests of urban taxpayers.
Point of order. Juneau is a member of the coalition.
Oh, did they change?
Yes.
Oh, they must have just joined. Okay. Well, last year they weren't a member, so that's interesting. Okay, thank you. The usage of the terms diversity and equity are subject now to a federal prohibition that potentially endangers our district's federal funding. And I think we only have to look to the actions of the University of Alaska here, I think it was last week, when they're now renaming any of the entities they have with those terms in them. So the university has recognized the seriousness of having a bureaucratic organization labeled with those terms as far as potential loss of federal funding. I think we should take that seriously also. I think there's a lot of excellent diversity programs and programs for inclusion throughout the school district's bureaucracy, and I'm not seeking to remove those. I support those. But I do think this particular office is particularly problematic, not only because of their really questionable origin, and also new federal guidelines that have come down. Thank you.
Seeing no other microphones lit up, I'll ask you to get Member Pack's vote and put the question on our screens.
Student Representative Pack,
No.
That motion fails 6-1. We move to our next item. Member Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I don't think, I know that every survey the district does of the public and our parents, one of the very top concerns they have is class size. I'm very concerned that this budget significantly increases our class sizes. I believe it's 4 students across the board. I know that my twins, who are in high school, they've got classes with over 30 kids in them already. I think it's just catastrophic to increase class sizes that much in this district. And I would like to see that one of our priorities as we examine this budget, to find less important things than class size and try to hold the class. So I've tried to research a series of other things that I think are less important than class size, because that is what parents are telling us is one of the top 2 or 3 most important things to them. So once again, I go back, because it's so expensive, even one, it's referred to as PTR, pupil teacher ratio. Even one PTR is very expensive to replace. I tried to find enough cuts to accomplish that, get it down to a 3 increase with other reductions in the budget. So I came up with discontinue the middle school model, the extra planning period, deleting one non-Title I elementary staffing in excess of the matrix for elementary schools, defunding the Office of Equity and the full name, excluding the sign language and the volunteer management portions of it, reducing assistant principals in high schools by 4, deleting our membership in the Coalition for Educational Equity, which is $32,000, deleting funding for membership in the Council of Great City Schools, which is $48,000, deleting funding in the Alaska Association School Boards, which is $32,000, and deleting membership in the National School Boards Association, which is $8,600, and then an additional 2% reduction in administrative services in the coded 510 and 550 functions, which once again are non-classroom related administrative functions. That totals about $5.359 million, which is enough to reduce the class size increase in this budget by 1. So that would reduce the PTR from 4 to 3 in this actual budget. And I would move amendment number 6 to do that.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Member Higgins. Member Donnelly, do you wish to speak further to it?
Mr. President, I think I explained it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Member Higgins.
Yeah, and again, I like the fact we're having a discussion and we're sharing the views that we have and how we think it's best for kids, and we can disagree without being disagreeable, and I find that a valuable thing. We have a lot of reductions in this budget, and the bad news is our budget is so bad that you can't make sense out of it. The good news is that when we finally get a budget, we can look at what we add back in, and of course we got a proposal to do that, and look at what we may not add back in. So I'm open to have a full discussion of saying, wait a minute, we identified these cuts, are these good cuts? But when we get to some of these, we need to understand what the facts are. When I was working 2 weekends ago with the Alaska State Legislature meeting with people, and they talked about cutting administrative costs. Well, we've got 6% administrative costs. Nonprofits are allowed to go 10%. That's $33 million. What are you getting for $33 million? It's not just the school board and the superintendent. We've got human resources, we've got finance, we have IT for the computers. We have critical need in those things, and we've been cutting those. And if you look at it over the last 10 years, we've increased classroom sizes. We've cut everywhere, all over the place within that. So it's always easy to say, let's just take a brush and cut more. But I'm seeing evidence of real limitations on what they've placed in the budget within that. For the various groups here, I'm not a big fan of the Council of Great City Schools. That's not a secret. But they do provide a valuable service when it comes to audits. because they get an audit done. We pay for top people in the country to come in. We pay their transportation, pay them per diem, and nothing more. Try to find any audit for that can go in and do purchasing, curriculum, special ed. We got a lot of things out there to do. So I'm not in favor of these cuts, but I am in favor of saying they're good for discussion once we get a final budget. If we get additional money, I hope other than the amount that's identified in the change that has been proposed by for adding the additional money into the classroom, which I appreciate a great deal. But this is a discussion that needs to be, in my opinion, done later. I'm not diminishing it because of the fact that I disagree, but I do think that we will have the opportunity in the future to discuss it. And I appreciate your passion for wanting to do it right now, but I just don't think it's a wise thing to do.
Member Jacobs.
Yeah, a question regarding I'm assuming we're looking at the right amendment on the screen, noting about the assistant principals in particular. A question for the amendment sponsor. At our last meeting, I think I specifically asked administration to confirm and assure the board that further reducing building leadership wouldn't simply create a redistribution workload where teachers were asked to take on more responsibilities for less pay. And they couldn't provide us that assurance. And so I think my question for the sponsor is, what responsibilities are our teachers being at risk of being placed on them? And do you propose a further amending our budget to compensate them for handling quasi-administrative responsibilities? Thanks.
Member Donnelly, if you wish to respond.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, once again, these are tough choices. What I'm suggesting is an inverse to reducing class sizes, maintaining these more administrative functions, and then hoping that we can restore class sizes with additional funding. I think we should minimize the reduction in class sizes in our actual budget, and then if we get additional money, go back and restore some of these choices here that are represented in this amendment. We're faced with, I totally agree with President Holloman that these are all difficult choices. At least 90% of them are super difficult choices. But I do think that class sizes should be the priority. And then we come back if we get additional money and restore some of these other things.
Mr. Chair, can I follow up?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the response by the sponsor. I didn't hear an answer to the question. I specifically am trying to weigh the extra duties that may be added to the responsibilities of our classroom teachers at the expense of reducing an FTE and building leadership, simply because the duties have to be done and there aren't enough building leadership present to do them. So if there's any information that can be provided as to what else a teacher might be asked to do with the off chance that they may see a smaller class size during their normal responsibilities to navigate, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Member Lessons.
Yeah, I actually had a question for the administration. What is the cost of a PTR -1, reducing PTR -1? In my mind, I had a different figure than what's on this paper.
Is this to reduce it across the board at one?
Yes, it's to do what the amendment says it would entail, to reduce K-12 PTR by 1.
It's typically, let's see. Just give me a second. It's generally in about the $7 million range. I think let me recalculate it really quick and I will tell you.
My working memory was 7.1. Is that,
Yeah, but the higher we go, the less value you get for each
Right.
PTR, and that's kind of what I don't recall. At the original PTR is about 7.
so the math doesn't add up in the amendment as it stands?
Let's see. No, it's pretty close. It's actually a little bit less than 5.3 million. It's around 5. So
Okay. All right, thank you.
but the lower you go, the more that PTR increase is going to cost.
Any further comments? Seeing no comments, did you want to wrap up? Or-
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. President. I would fully hope that if there was additional state funding, that some of the reductions that are contained in this amendment would be restored by the action of the board. But I would think that class sizes should be our very top priority.
I'll ask Ms. Sullivan to get member Pack's vote and put the vote on our screens.
Student Representative Pack,
Yes.
And that motion fails. Like a 6-1. Moving forward, member Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the board's time here. Last year, traditionally, this board has tried to keep class sizes lower in our lower grades, our K through 4, especially because the importance of our K through 12, or K through 4 students learning to read. And it's just such a crucial period of development that really screams out for lower class sizes. And last year I did attempt to do budget amendments that would focus on K through 4 class sizes. And so I'm back again this year with thinking about that also. So if we can't do it across the board, then I'm hoping we can at least, focus on it for our K through 4 students who really need smaller class sizes. This budget, as before us right now, increases class sizes across the board, K through 12. So if we were to discontinue the extra planning period in middle schools, that would give us about $3.43 million to utilize. And the latest numbers I had from our CFO was that to reduce our K through 4 class sizes by 2 students, to bring the PTR increase down from 4 to 2 would cost about $3.4 million. So eliminating the extra planning period in our middle schools would actually pay for not increasing our teachers as much in our K through 4 classes by 2 teachers. I think that's a priority. To me, that's just an absolute priority. I think that's more important than additional planning period in our middle schools. And accordingly, I'd move amendment number 7 to do that.
Is there a second? Seconded by member Higgins. Discussion. Okay. Member Higgins.
Well, first of all, sometimes we agree on little pieces of it, and this is one of them. We know that improving the classroom sizes in K through 3 can make a tremendous difference. I remember a study, I think it was in Philadelphia area, where they put a lower classroom sizes just on K through 3, and they got 90% of the impact is lowering classroom sizes in all the grades. So we agree that that's one. That doesn't dismiss the importance of middle school to me, but it means that when we get to a discussion of staffing and how we do it, we need to have an open listing of different options we have, and let's push those issues for discussion, because I do agree with that portion of it. The K through 3 is critical for success, and they show is that the success continues on after that. But I'm not supportive of matching up where those funds would come from if we do it, depending upon if we get additional funds. And I would want to wait until we have that full discussion once we know we get the additional funding from the state. But and then if we get the money and we go with the amendment that's being proposed and it lowers classroom sizes and different grades and throughout it, we can have a discussion then as to how that might factor in, because that gives us additional money in addition to fully funding what we've got. But at this particular point in time, I'm not going to support this discussion because it's something that's premature. But I do agree that low classroom sizes in K through 3 is really important.
Member Lessons.
Yeah, I wanted to contextualize this particular group of students who you're proposing to pull the middle school model from. That would be this year's 5th, 6th, and 7th graders, who will be next year's 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Back in the spring of 2020, they were kindergartners, first graders, and second graders. When you look at state and national data, these are the students who lost some of the largest amounts of learning, and they are still lagging. And I think it is absolutely critical as we move closer to their graduations that we maintain structures that are supportive of their needs. And we also heard from an educator. We've gotten a lot of testimony recently, and this educator recently wrote in about that middle school planning period, which is often called an extra planning period, but the educator explains we track student and family contact, struggling students, plans for helping those struggling students, agendas, and much more. We all know that ninth grade, especially the first semester of ninth grade, is imperative for graduating and especially graduating on time. Middle school collaboration time allows interventions to set students up for success in ninth grade and helps increase our graduation rates and decrease dropping out. So again, I believe the middle school model is directly supportive of our board goals, and in the next year will be especially supportive of students who still have lost learning and need to recover from that. Thank you.
Putting myself in the speaking order, I'll say that part of me just wants to impose a $5 penalty every time someone calls it extra planning. But I do want to make the point that there are assigned duties during that period, and they are distinct from the personal planning time that all of our staff, our classroom educator staff receives. And that's often overlooked, I think, when people are talking about it. There are specific things that we expect teachers to do. And the really remarkable part of it is that we actually give them time during the contract day to do it, as opposed to the many things that we don't give our teachers contract time to perform. So I do want to interject that point. Any other discussion or comments? Member Donnelly?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'd just say that I think that the actual budget, the budget we actually have enough money to fund, should prioritize class size. And we can, the board, if it chose to do so, if there were additional money coming in, restore the middle school model, the planning period. So it's a matter of choice of which one's more important than the other. And I fully acknowledge Member Lesson's concerns about those students that were caught in the pandemic, the years where we closed down our schools. I worked against that really hard, and I was proven right over and over again. And it was a 4-3 vote to get our kids back into schools even. So I completely acknowledge that as a very significant, matter. And this could be added back in if additional state funding did appear.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Ms. Sullivan to get Member Pack's vote and put the question on your screen.
Student Representative Pack,
No.
And that motion fails 6-1. Moving to our next item. Member Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll move Jacob's Lessons Amendment 1, which contains attachment A.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Pardon me. Member Jacobs, would you like to speak to your motion?
Sure, I can start with some comments. First, I want to appreciate and acknowledge the effort both from administration in helping us confirm that the facts and figures did match up with reality, as this is an important amendment, but also want to acknowledge that our finance chair, Member Lessons, was integral in making sure that we were prioritizing the right cuts, specifically as it related to previous budget years. The amendment before us would invest a conservative portion of what HB 69 promises to provide ASD if it's adopted as written. The bill would provide well north of $1,000 BSA increase. We are planning and proposing a list of priorities to fund which would address much needed classroom instruction investment and restore programs that our community finds valuable if only $1,000 BS increase were provided. And I'll point the board to specifically to the attachment, which indicates that there is a significant decrease in the PTR, which restores levels of service to 2016, which just so happens to have been the last time the legislature saw fit to adjust the foundation formula to account for inflation, would provide funding for charter schools, which have been a priority certainly of late. It would invest in new dollars for instruction through high-dose reading and math for tutoring for students. That certainly aligns with the Alaska Reads Act and the focus on state assessments in math. Would reverse cuts to the Gifted and Ignite program, as well as holdback teachers, reductions in special and elementary education, reversing cuts to our language immersion programs, which are certainly world-class and a luxury that we need to ensure we can provide our students whenever feasible. Would provide a correspondence allotment increase, would reverse cuts to the Whaley School and reverse elementary paraprofessional educator cuts, would reverse cuts to preschool teachers, and would reverse cuts to the Battle of the Books program and secondary summer school. Would reverse cuts to librarians and elementary nurses, would reverse the cuts that were proposed to middle school sports and our reading interventionists, which again align with the Alaska Reads Act, would restore the high school sports that were proposed for potential reduction in hockey, gymnastics, swimming and diving, as well as the dome facility, would restore necessary principles to meet our reach ratio approved across our district, as well as library assistance, and allow us to invest in a counselor to student ratio, which begins to approach the nationally recommended, but certainly falls short of it. And then also addresses additional staffing for our special education and deaf student program. With that said, I haven't been able to support an amendment that's been made thus far tonight because I am not inclined to harm one subset of our students to benefit another. Our job is to support all students, and I trust that administration has drafted a budget which we know may not be final. But if it is, this is an attempt to best serve every student with the resources that we are given. We certainly could look to reduce in another line item of our budget and deal with the additional workload that will put on our teachers in a short-sighted attempt to put a Band-Aid on a serious wound that exists due to legislative inaction. But I'm not interested in that short-sighted behavior. I think true leadership looks like, in this case, answering the call that we've heard recently for a plan that would demonstrate that classroom instruction continues to be our focus, would wisely invest resources in programs and in reducing class sizes that we know benefit student achievement, and would provide the necessary supports that our teachers ask for to ensure that they can be successful. And so I think that this proposed spending plan for additional funds is wise to attach to our operating budget, answers the question that we've received specifically as to how resources will be allocated, puts to rest that conversation, and will hold us accountable to ensure that those resources are wisely spent. The one area that really this amendment, I believe, doesn't address specifically is the cuts to administration, and those will stand with this proposed amendment if we choose to adopt it. We will continue year over year to be one of the most efficient districts in the state in terms of the percent of our operating budget that is allocated towards district administration costs. And that's worth noting. It doesn't set enough, certainly in the halls of our capital. With that said, I would be interested in hearing other feedback and would be glad to answer any questions.
Member Watsons.
Thank you. I wanted to begin by echoing Member Jacobs' appreciation for the support that we've received from a number of administrators in presenting this package to the board. So I sincerely appreciate that partnership. I think for me, this amendment is about making sure that our schools work for our kids, that they serve the community well, and that at the end of the day, they improve student outcomes. This is what this amendment was designed to do. It prioritizes sending dollars back to classrooms. It prioritizes making new investments in areas of acute need, specifically that high-dose reading and math tutoring for students who have been assessed as below or well below proficiency in grades 4 through 12, and for whom, quite frankly, we don't have a whole lot of supports. It makes a few new targeted investments in elementary counselors in alignment, direct alignment with our board goals and guardrails. It reverses all of the major cuts to kids and to classrooms and the people that serve them and their needs that are proposed in the FY26 budget. It does what needs to be done to serve our kids' needs, but it's not a magic wand, right? We're not changing anything here. We're going to be passing a balanced budget tonight. And unless somebody's got $71 million in a suitcase somewhere in this boardroom, I don't think that we can make that happen. So this is a promise. It's a guarantee. In fact, it's a directive. The language in the attachment reads that the Anchorage School District Administration shall amend the 25-26 financial plan and budget by making the investments detailed in attachment A. They are not ranked in order of priority. They are grouped all together because all of our students deserve the investment. Our correspondence students deserve an investment. Our charter schools would receive their share of the statutory increase to the base student allocation. It's the right thing to do. I encourage the board to support it. And I appreciate Member Jacobs emphasizing that the administrative reductions, which are currently in the budget before us, remain. There are still 42 administrative positions and roughly $4 million in other administrative cuts, which are not walked back in this package. The risk to the district remains. It still requires us to spend our fund balance down to that 5% level. So there's a lot of sports analogies that you could use. This is the Hail Mary if I've ever seen one. But again, it's the right thing to do. And it is my hope that if the board adopts this amendment, it will signal our clear-eyed intent to align every dollar we possibly can with our remarkable students' needs. So I would appreciate additional feedback from the board. Actually, before I relinquish the microphone, I will say I don't think I've ever seen as much community support for an amendment, a proposition before the board. We have received 200-300 emails. I don't really know. Every time I checked my email, there was another batch of 2 or 3 dozen. And they were all deeply, deeply supportive of this amendment. Thank you.
Member Higgins.
Thank you. I'm totally supportive of this. And I know that when I was went to Juneau with lobbying, at my funds, I didn't use any ASD funds. But when we went there, we kept hearing all kind of speculations or reasons why maybe we shouldn't fund public education. Maybe the money won't go in the classroom. Maybe this, maybe that. This addresses that concern. I think it would have been directed for education anyway. It would have been directed in the right ways. But let's stop the speculation. Let's lower the voices for discussion purposes, and we'll commit it to that. The testimony to me was 4 hours. The last board meeting was the good and bad. Okay, 4 hours wasn't the best part, but what we heard was all the things that parents and the students here appreciate that we're providing through the school district, and we're supporting that. We're responding to it. We're showing you that's our highest priority, and I think that's what we should be doing. And so I'm totally supportive. I appreciate the work that went into this particular amendment, this action to do it. And I know it's all a contingency, but I think we're sending a strong message, and we can try to move away from that speculation that is trying to oppose the BSA that we need. Thank you.
Member Bellamy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank the makers, the writers of the motion. I want to thank the administration. Actually, my own thoughts of how to come up with an amendment, I put them aside once I really looked at what this amendment does. It does prioritize instruction. It prioritizes supports to instruction. But most importantly, I believe it represents what this community values for its kids. We've heard hours and hours and hours of testimony, and everything on this list has value that this amendment would bring back. It is not about competing programs against programs, and I hate that's the part of this whole experience. I know we can't afford everything, but I also don't want to say one program is more important than another, so we can just do these for this kids and something else for the other kids. We have to look out for every single kid. So this does not choose among our even in a climate of diminishing resources, it does not choose. I do worry about the work that we ask administrators to do, but we've got a team of exceptional people, and they will make it work. And if it doesn't, then we'll have to come back to it at some other point, because it's a lot of work. And then my last comment is just around our strategic plan and our goals and our guardrails. This puts the focus back on those goals and our goals and our guardrails. And so I do, Member Jacobs, Member Lessons, and the administration, all the extra time it took. I think I'll sleep a little better tonight, but I really won't sleep really well until like May 30th, when I know we know what the legislature is going to do, and we can come back and revisit this with this guidance. So I thank you.
Member Donnelly.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. I had a couple of questions for the makers of the amendment. This amendment makes the restoration of the list of budget items contingent on the state providing an additional $71 million. What happens to this list if the state doesn't provide $71 million? Maybe if they provide $55 million, what happens to this list?
I think that's a great question. My sense is that this refers to that specific proposition, but I would hope that it would serve as a guide for us to easily understand what certain investments cost. We have Board Policy 3000, which specifically says, I think no fewer than 3 times, that we need to align our investments with our goals that we want to see achieved. with early reading, with math, with graduation rates. So I would hope that the board abides by its board policy in investing any dollar increment that we receive should that come forward. But this doesn't speak to a $100 BSA increase or a $300 BSA increase or a $680 BSA increase. It speaks to what would happen if we received $1,000.
So just to clarify, if there wasn't 71 million or more approved, then this resolution would be ineffectual. It wouldn't increase it wouldn't fund any of these items that are listed.
I think that's a technical truism, but I believe that we as a body would come and grapple with the recommendation that would come forward by the superintendent of that time for the ways that the superintendent would recommend that we invest those dollars in classrooms, in programs, in our board goals. That would be my expectation.
Okay. So the delegation to the superintendent that appears in this resolution is not effectual unless there's at least $71 million increase.
Yes.
Why does the amendment delegate the budget power to the administration? Why can't the board just come back and do what you just described based on any additional funding?
Point of order, it doesn't delegate that. It specifically says that the administration shall amend the budget by making the investments detailed in attachment A. And it doesn't say as detailed by the board, but this is a board resolution should it be adopted. That is directing the administration. So that is not a relinquishment of board authority whatsoever. This is a specific line by line direction for how the board would like to see that investment made.
Member Jacobs, did you want to comment on this?
To the I guess the series of questions, just to add context. We've heard secondhand from testimony at our meetings that additional resources are coming. House Bill 69 passed out of House Education through a motion to discharge, and then passed through House Finance unanimously, I think, or without objection. And the House minority has now twice attempted to move that bill to be discussed and brought to a floor vote. There hasn't been any significant discussion as to what the figure for the base student allocation increase should be. With that said, I think also, I won't speak for member lessons, but I was hesitant to include the full amount, just recognizing our state's fiscal picture. A $1,000 BSA increase is certainly not only politically within the realm of possibility, because it's the right thing to do for students, and the plan that we have to invest in programs and class sizes that would benefit Anchorage students makes that case very clearly as to what the need is. But also from a practical standpoint, resources either are or can be made available to fund this bill. And so, in a hypothetical scenario, with no staff support, we share one administrative staff between us, and personal lives that include, at least for myself, a full-time employment, and for many of us who are have families and other full-time obligations, it isn't feasible to draft any number of different scenarios. But this matches a scenario that's both realistic, politically palatable, as well as answer a direct question that this board has been asked. And so, if in a hypothetical scenario where less resources were allocated, one of the first things I would do is ask us to circle with our team and continue allocating resources as they're appropriated. But I think hopefully that addresses the question. Thanks.
Getting back on the speaking order, Member Higgins, and then Member Donnelly. Member Donnelly?
Yeah, Member Lessons, I appreciate your interpretation of the language as not delegating the board's authority, but it actually says that. It says guidance from the board to the administration to amend the budget. It doesn't say the board will amend the budget. It says the administration will amend the budget.
Member Donnelly,
Yeah.
That's because board members are not in charge of preparing a 400 and something page document. The administration prepares it and brings it to us for approval under board guidance. I don't want to go into our CFO's computer.
I can understand that. Well, Mr. President, I wish that was just worded differently, because as it's worded now, it raises a concern about the appropriateness of delegation of powers, but I'll accept Member Lesson's interpretation of this language. But there is an additional constitutional concern because there's certainly a prohibition on the delegation of legislative authority to the executive branch, and that's pretty clear. But there's also the principle of legislative entrenchment, which is commonly known as one elected body cannot bind a future elected body. So this amendment would have no binding effect whatsoever after the April elections here in the municipality, because at that time there will be a new board. And this board cannot bind a future school board on a budgetary matter. So unless this funding occurred before the April election and the swearing in of the new board, even if everybody got reelected, it would still be a new board. It's unconstitutional to bind a future board. So I have to imagine that the only way this would work is if it happened before the new election occurred and the new swearing in occurred, because otherwise it would clearly violate the principle of legislative entrenchment, which has been confirmed by United States Supreme Court cases to apply to elected bodies in the United States. So that's a concern. I guess I can interpret it as saying it only applies up till the election period of time, because I'm trying to find a way that it's constitutional, because I actually support this list of suggested restorations. I'm trying a way to justify that, my support for what it does with the constitutional concerns and my oath of office to uphold follow the Constitution. So maybe with those caveats, it's going to be something that I can support, but I want to raise those, that there's no way this is binding after the next election. It's just not.
Actually, I'm going to put myself into the speaking order on this because I did have a similar concern about the language. But it is mitigated by the fact that there's a very specific document that we may approve tonight that details the changes. It's not a carte blanche to the administration to make changes they want. I am going to move that we strike the word amend and substitute the word change, such that it would say the school district administration shall change the 2025-26 financial plan and budget by making the investments detailed in attachment A, which obviously would only be in effect if we pass this document tonight. I'll pause to see if I get a second before I speak further.
Yeah, I'd second that, Mr. President. And I'd point out that it appears in two places in the resolution, early on, and also subsequently in the paragraph that reads, therefore should the legislature approve permanent statutory increase, et cetera, et cetera. It once again uses the terminology amend, which is exclusive power of the board.
I'm not seeing where the second mentioned? Okay, and that actually.
Point
is
of
what
order,
I was again.
that's a phrase, are you reading, if the legislature were to successfully amend statute?
No, it says the Anchorage School District Administration shall amend the financial.
On the
plan.
first page or the
No,
second
the
page?
second page, second to last paragraph.
I believe that's what President Holloman is referring to.
Oh, well then amend also appears on the first page. I thought that's what he was referring to.
I said second. I didn't know really what order we were in.
Oh. Okay. With that clarification, I agree.
And do you still wish to second it?
Yes.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Amend is a technical term, and that is the authority that the board has. And I can see value in not even appearing to delegate that, but we would authorize them to make changes. And I think it also shows a higher level of commitment than simply making it a resolution. We will expect the administration to implement these changes at the moment they feel confident additional funds are coming. And our normal process, of course, is that when the legislature does change an amount of money after we've done our budget, the administration would develop recommendations and come back to us. But this would give them a little bit of lead time. They'd be able to respond more quickly, I think, and more effectively if that amount of money does reach the level that triggers the stipulations in this. So I'll put the amendment before you for discussion at this time, if anyone wishes to speak to it. Member Wilson, or no, Member Donnelly, and then Member Lessons.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make it clear to the public that this is a very strange contingent budgetary provision. It's only contingent on the state actually approving $71 million or more in additional revenue. If that doesn't happen, if it's $70 million, this resolution doesn't take effect. I think some of the changes, I really support this list of additions to the budget if the funding was available. But I think some of these ought to be included in the actual budget we passed tonight and not in a potential future change to the budget, because I think they rise to a higher level of importance. So that's my number one concern.
Member Lessons.
I have no objection to the amendment, changing the word amend to change.
I don't know if we're at the point where a friendly amendment can just be accepted, but I'll let us vote.
I
on
also
it
have
just
no
for-
objection to a friendly amendment.
Okay. We will vote on this, but thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Ms. Sullivan to put the vote on your screen if she's ready, because there's a little bit of technical work that has to be done anytime we do a surprise amendment like this one. And if you will ask Member Pack what his vote is.
Student Representative Pack,
Yes.
And by 7-0, the amendment is adopted, and we can continue discussion on the motion. Member Donnelly?
Thank you, Mr. President. So considering moving my amendment number 1, I need to modify it to make it so that it's fits with the amendment that was just passed. So when I actually move it, I will attempt to orally modify it to conform with the amendment that the board just adopted.
Member Donnelly, would you like an at ease for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, thank you.
We'll take a 10-minute at ease. Thank you. We'll call this meeting back into order at 7:39 p.m. We have all our members back in their seats, and we had just passed the amendment changing the word amend to change, and we are back on the Jacobs-Wesson amendment to the budget. Does anyone wish to speak? Member Wilson.
I just wanted to say that I support this amendment. Each cut that we have to move forward with this evening takes something away from our students, as every cut since I've been on the board and previous to me, prior to me being on the board, has taken something away from each of our students, and being able to restore all of what's on this list would be amazing. I like to try to keep my glass half full, and I believe that our community members will continue to encourage their legislators to support education funding and support an increase in the base student allocation, so that our educators, our students, our families can know what's coming next year, so they can be prepared in a positive way, so they can know that their students can have the resources available to them, not just this year, but next year, and plan for that every year. I hope that our legislators will support that BSA increase, and I look forward to being able to restore any and all of these cuts on this list. I also want to reiterate what Member Lessons and Member Jacobs have stated, is every item on this list shows the commitment of this board to make sure that our funding is going to our students, to their academics, to their experience. And so, again, I will support this amendment.
Anyone else have a comment? I will say I also support it. I do think if there is a level of funding from the legislature, this provides a clear roadmap, enables the administration to begin moving quickly. Member Donnelly's point that it's not completely binding is well taken, although I would offer that the next board is not bound by this budget. Even they can make alterations during the year, as ill-advised as that might be, as they go along. But amending the budget is something that happens. It is, I say to the public that's watching and listening, the calendars of the legislature and the school board fiscally, things just don't match up. And they have not yet had time to do what they have to do. And yet we're compelled to do this now by statute in order to give it to the city for the actions that they have to take. So it's not anything anyone would intentionally design. And the process of doing a budget, waiting, finding out a somewhat different number is a very common one. It's been going on for a very long time. And then the administration normally comes back with recommendations for adjustments. And I'll say I think the district has gotten better at trying to minimize the disruption over the years. There was a point where every non-tenured teacher was laid off every year until they were tenured. And that worked because there were thousands of people waiting in line that wanted to have a job with the Anchorage School District. That's no longer the case. And so part of looking at this, I think the budget that got proposed to us by the administration, some of it is just based on not dismantling things we think we won't have to dismantle that are very hard to put back together, versus dismantling things that are important to us, but relatively easier to put back together. But at the same time, every time we go through this iteration, you lose some things. People decide to transfer out of a program that looks like it's going to be cut. People get tired of it. If you're an Ignite teacher and you've worked really hard and you feel like you've got great results, seeing your program put on the chopping block is extremely depressing, and it makes you want to go do something else that you feel is supported and will be there and that you can actually build on. So every bit of this disruption is harmful, and at this stage of the game, there's not a lot of positive that comes out of it. But I do think that this amendment states rather clearly, if the funds are there, this is what we'll do. And we do want to make that clear to everybody. So if no one else has their mic. Sorry. Member Pack, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did, Mr. President. I did just want to add in my 2 cents real quickly as a student representative. Despite, however direction or whatever direction the legislature goes, it gives me some peace that, this current board at least, is considering fully supporting students no matter what occurs, to the best of their abilities. And that to me is some level of assurance. And I think that I speak for a lot of my peers that are thankful for that. And I'm voting in favor of this, my advisory vote.
With Member Pack having indicated his vote, I'll ask Ms. Sullivan to put this on our screens for us to vote. And we are voting on the Jacobs Lessons Amendment as amended. And the amendment passes 7-0. That brings us back to the main question as amended, and I have Member Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I still have an interest in getting middle school and high school sports into the actual budget versus the list of items the board will fund if additional money comes in. And to that effect, I'm going to offer a modified amendment number 1, which has a series of reductions that I've already articulated in other amendments, so I'm not going to just repeat all those. But the bottom line is that I'm going to add the following language to it, that it be modified to be consistent with the previously adopted budget revisions and include all proposed reductions in the list of items to be funded by future additional funds. So with that language, what I hope I have done with this is just reversed these items with middle school and high school sports, so that middle school and high school sports would be funded in our actual budget that we're passing tonight, and that all these items would appear on our list of what we would fund if additional funds were provided by the legislature. So not to say we are not going to fund those, but to put them on the future list rather on the current list, so that we can ensure that middle school and high school sports be continued. And with that explanation, I would offer amendment number 1.
Is there a second?
Okay.
Not seeing a second, the motion fails. We're back on the main question as amended. Member Higgins. Microphone, please.
People like it when I'm silent. I want to address the issue of the immersion program. I got to tell you, got a lot of testimony from a lot of people, and some of them made mistakes of put their phone numbers on the emails, and they got some phone calls. And that was really educational to me. I got to tell you, when you get into a discussion like that, I learned something that I didn't realize. I didn't realize how dependent we are on other governments that are providing, like the French teachers. We're going to be using them for Spanish and others. And of course, they have to go through a process of getting a visa. You have the timing issue, so it's very critical. So all of our delay in funding from the state impacts all of our operations. We're trying to hire teachers. We're trying to get this. But it's especially bad for the immersion programs, with those programs that we are getting people from abroad, where we have to have the visas. With timing here, we're going to be jeopardizing continuing the immersion program if we don't ensure that somehow they can hire them timely. It's going to push that back, and that's a big issue to me. And so I want to make sure that we're not delaying unnecessarily, or not unnecessarily, but for any reason. If we delay this, then we're basically undermining the immersion program. And these aren't programs you can start, stop, and restart. You have to maintain them to be successful. So I'm going to make the motion as follows. I move to direct the administration to proceed with the hiring of 7 immersion teachers, 3 French, 3 Spanish, and 1 Chinese, in anticipation of additional state funding being appropriated. In the event additional state funding is not received, the administration will propose additional reductions to fund the teachers for FY26. I want to be supportive of the immersion programs. I realize we delay this. We are damaging the immersion programs in a way that they may not be able to recover. And so I'm making this motion. Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'll put this to the superintendent and his staff to give us some feedback on the cost of this, and if we were to proceed with this and additional funds did not become available, what kind of difficulty you foresee in trying to adjust the budget to cover it?
Mr. Ratliff, could you confirm the cost of 7 immersion teachers? And then Mr. Lang, can you confirm how this amendment would or would not aid in the processing of these teachers?
The cost will be about $883,000.
So I'll use the example of the French immersion. We have an MOU with the French government. They effectively do headhunting for us and look for qualified teachers who would be interested in coming on a 2-year exchange to work in our immersion program. And once they've curated a pool of candidates, then we start our interview process. And then ultimately, if we select one, then we would offer them a contract and they would start the visa process. There are parts of that we can start without having any funding secured. So principals and, Brandon Locke and World Languages can always work with the French government or governments of other nations and start that process and even interview without funding to support it. Where we would have to stop short is actually offering them a contract. So if we made the commitment to offer them a contract, then we would at that point be obligated to find the offset funding for that $883,000.
Thank you. Comment from the board, Member Jacobs.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. An informational question then. To administration, do you need administration direction or direction from the board? Need board direction for the administration to plan on the legislature appropriating adequate funds to maintain our current level of service in our immersion program in the budget book? Do we need to add this language, I guess is my question right now, in this format, in this document?
Based on my understanding of the facts, it sounds like we can proceed with most of the steps except for offering the contract to the teachers. So if the board felt it prudent to be able to complete that step, this amendment would support that effort. However, what we need to discuss is where we would find the $883,000, which has a domino effect and implicitly assigns priorities to which program should be reinstated. So that's the one issue I'd like for the board to discuss.
And with that said, Mr. Chair, could I ask for a 2-minute recess, please?
We will recess for 2 minutes.
Here's the problem. I have been on school board
This meeting back into order at 7:58. It has been brought to the chair that this motion is out of order in that we're compelled to present a balanced budget. And in essence, this motion rides on unspecified revenues. And if those revenues don't appear, it relies on unspecified cuts. And so I am ruling that as it exists, if we were to pass this, it would actually create an unbalanced budget. And that's unfortunately the balanced budget thing is what makes this all so hard. So that is my ruling as chair. And if the body would like to take it up, Member Higgins. Microphone, please.
I do have a substitute motion that I'm prepared with, and I've worked with the CFO in regards to generating it. So I'll bring that up now. Give me 1 second to pull it up. I can find it and sent easier. Wait a minute.
The ruling of the chair. Just a point of order.
Yes.
Was it your ruling that the motion was out of order?
That's my ruling.
So
yes.
do we need to vote on that? Because I
Only
think
if somebody
Unless you're
protests it.
challenging it.
If it's unchallenged, then this motion is out of order.
Okay, so it's out of order.
Okay, let me find it real quick.
So,
He
Mr.
has
President,
a
I
good one.
would suggest that Member Higgins be given the opportunity to just craft a new amendment and start fresh.
Yes.
The one
Sustain your-
difficulty with that is we did put a deadline on amendments of noon this past Saturday.
Yep, we did.
The question to the board would be, are they willing to extend that courtesy to replace this amendment at this time?
I have a question.
Member
I
Donnelly?
think he gave notice that he was going to offer. Pat, did you submit? I thought you submitted something on this subject matter.
He
No.
did have a submission by Saturday that was not fully in the form of a motion. And so what's on the paper before you was language that he modified after being able to talk to staff yesterday. So this would be allowing a substitute. I offered that we would let it be a placeholder, even though that intrudes on the Open Meetings Act a little bit. Public wasn't able to actually see the language of it. So the question I would put to the board, is there objection to allowing Member Higgins to substitute a different amendment at this time
On the same subject matter.
on the same subject matter?
Well, Mr. Chair, I guess I would like to see the amendment first. Thank you.
Okay. Any other objection or modification? If not, I'll ask Member Higgins to present.
Okay. I move to amend the budget to restore 7 teachers, 3 French, 3 Spanish, and 1 Chinese at language immersion schools at a cost of $883,000 and to increase the estimated attrition to fund them.
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. I move to amend the budget to restore 7 teachers, 3 French, 3 Spanish, and 1 Chinese at language immersion schools at a cost of $883,000 and to increase the estimated attrition to fund them.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. I would ask the budget director for clarification if attrition is.
So point of order, Mr. Chair. I'm
Yes.
just going to say that the reason why we had our very planned intentional process for budget amendments was so that we weren't asking for definitions like attrition and asking our CFO to define on the fly what that looked like for our district. We don't have the opportunity to research and weigh in on this. I tend to be pretty deliberate and like to take my time looking at matters. I'm being asked to examine this proposal without that opportunity to research. So I do object to this amendment as worded, given that it does not adhere to the public notice and opportunity for the public to weigh in like all of our other amendments did. Thank you.
Member Lessons.
Are we debating the motion before us at this point in time?
I'm going to say at this point in time, we're debating whether or not it should be allowed.
Then I will hold my remarks.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd have to look at the Roberts Rules Handbook. I think I raised a point of order that the motion is out of order because we've established rules for operating tonight. I think it's your purview as chair to determine whether or not this amendment is out of order, given that we set a special set of rules for tonight's meeting.
This is a marvelous place to be. I'm going to say that if we had followed that strictly, it would be out of order for those reasons. And that is part of why I asked if anyone objected to extending the courtesy. And I think once we say we're going to hear the amendment, then we're obliged to take it up on its merits, that if we simply weren't going to hear amendments that had not come in earlier, that would be a valid objection. I do admit this is uneven territory, but that is my ruling, is that we will hear it. And of course,
Mr.
anyone
Chair, I
is welcome
appeal
to
the
challenge.
ruling of the chair.
And I'm sorry, did you?
I'm appealing the ruling of the chair.
Okay. So there is an appeal to the ruling of the chair. It will be put to the board for a vote. And my rusty memory of Roberts doesn't tell me if that's debatable. If no one objects to debate, if anyone wants to weigh in on it, and then we will vote on whether to uphold that ruling or reject it.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to, I'd have to look up, and so we could take a recess to figure out if it's debatable, but if we're allowing debate, I'll just say the reason why I'm objecting is because I needed to hear the amendment to determine if it was substantially similar to what you previously allowed, and this is very different from what was just set into record. So that does violate the process that we laid out weeks ago, with adequate public notice for the opportunity for the community to weigh in. So that's why I object, and I would ask the board to support the motion to overrule the chair.
Would anyone else like to weigh in? Member Donnelly.
Well, in addition to the parliamentary question, rules question is the substantive question. And this endangerment of our immersion programs from the timing required to obtain proper teachers with these expertise is really significant. I'm very concerned about that by the delay.
Point of order, are we talking about the amendment, or are we talking about whether or not we're going to even move forward to discuss the amendment? So I'm a little confused here. Can I get some clarification, please?
I will say this does need to be on the topic of objecting to the amendment as a technical issue.
So you're limited just to a debate on how Robert's rules work and not the actual substantive impact on the community?
Whether the chair should be overruled, yes.
Well, the reason I think the chair should be sustained is because of the potential serious negative impact upon our immersion programs.
Thank you. Any other member Bellamy?
So I think we can probably say the same thing. I understand that the immersion teachers are but all teachers, this applies to all of our teachers, right? So I don't know. I need to, where are the 3 Spanish? Where are they? I don't remember. Where are they? I don't even know that. I know about the French immersion teachers, 2 of them. I don't know about 3. I've not heard about. So anyways,
Mr.
I
Chair,
just have
point of
questions.
information. I want to make sure we're speaking to, and we probably should hold a vote on, if no one has any comments on the parliamentarian question we're deciding, do we want to overrule the ruling of the chair?
Oh, is that what we're doing?
I
So I'm
will,
confused
yeah.
too then.
At the moment,
So
this
let's
is
maybe back up.
discussion just on whether the ruling of the chair should be overturned.
Oh, okay. Then I'll just.
Member Higgins? Anyone else? If not, I'll ask Ms. Sullivan.
Mr. Chair, I would ask you to define a yes and a no vote, please.
Yes. Check with Member Pack and put it on our screens. Yes vote would sustain the chair. I'm checking with Ms. Sullivan to make sure I'm getting it right. Okay. We're going to say a yes vote would overrule the chair, a no vote would sustain the chair. Anyone need any other clarification? And it will be on your screen in a moment. Or oh, gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
Because of the limitations of board docs, it would have to be moved and seconded in order to do an electronic vote. This is an objection about a ruling of the chair, so it's not normally seconded. We'll do a voice vote on
Can I have
this.
one last clarification before we vote? So yes would be, just in simple terms, if I was to vote yes, then that would mean that that Member Higgins would not move the amendment forward. If I was to vote no, then yes, he would move the amendment forward. In layman's terms, yes, correct? Okay, thank you.
I got it differently. That a yes vote is to overrule the chair who was going to allow the amendment. So a yes vote would stop the amendment from coming to the floor and overrule the chair. And a no vote would sustain the chair. That's correct.
And Mr. President, consistent with that, maybe you could state the question as, shall the decision of the chair be reversed? And that would be, no, but that is exactly what you're saying, right? Yeah,
Can
it's a no sustains the chair.
For the record, I was going to word it differently from the beginning, but Member Higgins?
If I got this simple, if you vote no, I get a chance to go forward with the amendment. That's all that really matters. And so if you want the amendment to go forward, you vote no.
Correct. Everybody on board? Okay. Ms. Sullivan will call the roll.
Member Wilson,
Yes.
Member Bellamy, Member Donnelly,
No.
Member Jacobs,
Yes.
Member Lessons,
Yes.
President Holloman.
No. And to note, the chair just voted to override himself. No, actually, I voted to sustain myself. I got that right. I got that right. Okay. That motion passes, fails. So the chair has been overruled and we will not consider the amendment tonight. Thank you. Sorry that things got worded a little backwards there, but this is what live television looks like. Thank you. We are back to the main motion as amended, and the floor is open for discussion. Member Lessons.
So what we see in front of us is no longer, that's okay. But really, we're speaking to the original motion, which is to adopt the FY26 budget as amended through the board's unanimous adoption of the Jacobs Lessons Amendment.
Correct.
Great.
And the floor is back open for discussion on that.
So I just want to briefly say that we are bound to pass a balanced budget. The revenue that we have available does not meet the expected expenditures. We know that we would need to maintain the same level of service next year. Therefore, we are spending reserves. We're going to need a supermajority of the board to pass this budget because we're going to exceed our board policy regarding fund balance, which establishes that we shall maintain an 8% level. And this budget is conditioned on spending down to a 5% level. So we are assuming substantial risk. And then we begin to make cuts after we spend our reserves. And those cuts are to classrooms. Those cuts are to sports and activities. Those cuts are to programs. They are cuts to personnel who will keep our kids safe, who will give them access to information, and will help them grow. That's the budget before us. I will support it because that's what we have to do at the end of the day. The district needs an operating budget. But this is not a surprise, and I've been anticipating this vote, if that's the right word, or I've noted it in my mind since about the time the 33rd legislature gavelled out at the start of last summer. I appreciate all of the advocacy that this board has engaged in. We unanimously adopted a joint resolution which established our interest in asking for an inflation adjustment to the base student allocation going back to FY11. Our assembly partners also passed that joint resolution in early January on an 11-0 vote. But we're still waiting on our legislative partners and our legislative champions. And so I appreciate the unanimous vote that the board made tonight in support of the amendment regarding how we would direct the administration to invest $1,000 increase to the base student allocation. I think it's a wise decision, but I'm still not happy about what passage of this budget itself begins and what it represents, because our kids will not be served well by the budget that we have to prepare. Thanks.
Other comments? Member Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the members who seconded my amendments earlier tonight to allow there to be debate on them. I'm grateful for that. I've tried to shift the priorities of this budget to reducing class sizes, holding down class sizes as much as possible. I fully acknowledge that this is a terrible situation we're in, trying to balance the budget at this point in time, not knowing what we're going to get for additional state revenue. But I really felt that class size, immersion, Ignite, these were all things that should have been within this actual budget and not on the list of things to fund if we got more money. And I proposed ways to accomplish that. I'm disappointed that those weren't included in this budget proposal. Also sports. I think sports are really important. So I think there was a way to do it. I think it was consistent with what our parents and community have been telling us were their priorities. And I think that there are other things that should have been on the next step list rather than those.
Additional comments? Member Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the comments and support of the amendment I helped create tonight, and appreciate the board in a pretty unique way publicly declaring its intent to continue prioritizing classroom instruction and programs that our community values. I'll say that I think it's telling that even the amendments we discussed tonight discussed a section of the total operating budget, which I mean is a fraction. It really was working around the margins at best. There isn't a sustainable way to move forward without substantial legislative action. And if that isn't clear for those who have been following the process to this point, I'm not sure how else we can better articulate that message, but we certainly will continue to try. With that said, I am extremely, extremely grateful for everyone, and that we truly have received hundreds of responses just within the last 48 hours that have been uplifting in the work that we've been doing to continue to prioritize classroom instruction and our valued programs. like language immersion and Ignite, and our sports at the middle school and high school level, our librarians, our nurses, the folks who make our buildings work. And I would ask our community join us in the next phase of advocacy, which is connecting with elected officials and urging them to get the job done. We need to make sure the goalposts stop moving at this point. We've been asked to provide clear intent for future budget allocations. That question is asked and answered. We have publicly available data based on our current budget. We have extraordinary amounts of accountability on education spending in our state, and the information is there to make an educated decision. We now need to work to confirm who supports public education in our state, and then to make sure that legislation passes with those that do support it. And so that will be my area of focus in addition to my normal board work and the other responsibilities I have personally, and would ask our community to join us during that process, as it truly will be your voices that make the difference. Thank you.
Member Wilson.
I distinctly remember last year during our budget season conversations, I believe it was the superintendent that said, we have no muscle left to cut. We're cutting into bone now. And then this budget truly is removing limbs. I mean, it is, if this budget truly was to move forward without the legislative assistance of additional funding and increasing our base student allocation, we're looking at an elimination of almost 200 teachers. 200. All of our middle school sports, part of our high school sports, decreasing our nursing staff in our schools to half-time. I mean, how do you predict when there's going to be an emergency in an elementary school? Is it going to be in the morning? Is it going to be in the afternoon? Our librarians, who are a vital part of our schools, I mean, that's just the start. If you look through the budget cuts, they're beyond deep this year. So I hear Member Jacobs asking for our families, for our public to advocate to their legislators. And I really implore you to do that, because there is not one student, there is not one staff, there is not one community member that will not be affected by this budget in a negative way. And that is not okay. That is not okay for our kids. And I've had to sit through some really, really hard budget cuts before, but this is ridiculous. This is horrible. So I really hope and pray that we come back and say we have been able to reinstate much of what's been cut. I absolutely hope that we are able to do that.
Member Higgins.
Yeah, this, I've been on the board a long time, and this is by far the worst budget process I've ever had to go through. It's just, there's no way to make sense out of it. The budget being proposed by the administration was the only one they could do for all practical purposes. I think the amendment to be able to dedicate funds to the classroom is a good one, and I applaud that, and I move forward with it. In regards to concerns that may be out there from the immersion program now that amendment was derailed, some explanation is appropriate. I didn't know about this issue as big as it was until Friday morning talking to somebody. Then I delayed talking to a director because I was uncertain what the administration's view was about the process to reach out to others. And I reached out for information to try to do it diplomatically and didn't get a response. And then finally went forward anyway. And at that particular point, there wasn't time to get in touch with the CFO to be able to pull the rest of it together. And that's why this happened the way it did. I'm very comfortable, at least, that the superintendent has identified that they can move forward. And if we run into a time frame with that, I would hope the superintendent would come forward. If it's because the legislature waits until June to finalize something, I have been on the board when we had to send out layoff notices because we didn't have the budget within a given time frame of the beginning of the new year. Some of those rules have changed, but it tells you how late they can run. So I hope that that will not have successfully derailed filling that for the immersion program or damaged the immersion program. And I, like I said, will encourage the administration, if that's an issue, to come forward and let us know in filling it. But I think they can probably address it in some positive way. But I'm going to approve this, support it, because we really don't have much of a choice with the legislature. The best you can do to support your programs, and we have a lot of people talking about it, is to call your legislators now and call the governor, let them know where you stand. I was here in 2000, I think it was 14, when Greater Alaska Schools went overboard going after it with the legislature, and we got an increase in because of it. I think we need the same impact from the public, and raise your voice loud. But I will support it, and I appreciate the nightmare of what we've had to go through.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I will make my own. I have been involved in this for a long time. I first started working with the Anchorage School District in 1994. And so this process gets very familiar, and it's still surreal after all these years. You see boards pass budgets, and I'm sure some of you are just wondering how we could do that. But we are sitting at a moment where we don't know what we don't know yet. When this starts, the administration has to pick a number that has some basis in fact. And it is the case the legislature has never decreased the BSA. And at times, we've had a governor that advocated for a certain level of increase. And the administration could look at that number, look at the disposition of the legislature, and make a reasonable statement. They can expect this much in the way of funding. The governor's budget has minimal extra funding over the BSA. And the thing is that the BSA is only funding us at about 80% of what we have this year. And that's part of the gap between the BSA and the district we've been running has grown as the BSA itself has stayed flat. So it would be a huge step, and most of these cuts would come back if we simply get this year's funding again with a couple of percent for inflation, because I think everybody recognizes some things have increased in cost over the past year. And then if it goes beyond that, we can do more. And I'm certainly hoping that it does. But if we can get the BSA aligned to what the cost of the district is, with the expectation that inflation will be addressed on a regular basis, this part of this discussion goes away. We know that we'd be able to come back and run the programs we ran this year and next year. And then we might look at the efficiency of those programs or how effective they are and possibly make changes to others, but it would be about improvement. It wouldn't simply be about trying to meet a number. We're trying to meet a number that is very much below what we had from the state for this year. And yeah, no, I don't think anyone likes any of the cuts that are in this budget. And it's painful to vote for it. As an educator, it's painful. But I also understand the reality that we're out right now. The legislature has not yet had time to do their job. The governor seems to be changing his mind on what he might do. Again, that's not a number we can actually put in a budget and count on. We do have to wait. And in the meantime, a lot of people will sit and wonder how things are going to turn out. With that said, this does become something of an interim budget until we find out what the real numbers are. So painfully, I will vote in favor of this as well. If there are no other comments, I will ask Ms. Sullivan to put it on your screens for a vote. Because this does assume a fund balance of 5%, if this budget passes, I will ask someone for a motion to suspend our board policy to allow the drawdown to 5%. That does have to pass by a supermajority of 5 out of the 7 votes. The budget itself only needs 4 votes to pass, but to approve a reduction in fund balance for the budget, that would take 5 votes. So if there are no questions, I will ask Ms. Sullivan to go ahead and put the budget before you as amended.
Student Representative Pack,
Yes. Yes.
And by a vote of 6 yeas and 1 nay, this budget has been adopted.
Mr. Chair, I would ask that the vote for adoption on ASD Memorandum 096S also be considered as the supermajority vote required to satisfy board policy to spend the maximum allowed amount of fund balance.
I'll ask if there is any objection to our making that assumption. Hearing none, the vote on the budget will serve as an indication that the board has authorized 5% fund balance rather than our board policy stipulation of 8%. Are there any further comments or questions to come up before the board? We have no other items on our agenda. If no one wishes to speak, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Member Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to wait till we got done with our budget business to raise this, but at our last meeting, a member raised some concerns about and named some legislators by name. And I was just wondering, is that consistent with our policy?
I'm not sure that question has ever come up. And I can't remember the precise quote right at the moment. Someone say there was no objection made at the time. I would have to go back and review the recording to see if I thought there was something out of line about it.
I just would appreciate some guidance going forward, because if that's our policy, I want to be consistent with it.
I can't think of policy that directly addresses it, but I could research that and come back with something at a later time.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We are in adjournment. Thank you.